Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, Services Upstaging Software in the Business Intelligence Space, Insights from TBR's BI Professional Services Customer Research Report. I'm Allison Crawford, and I'm hosting today's webinar. According to TBR research, 60% of business intelligence professional services customers adopted their BI solution within the last 2 years, and 55% of customers are evaluating additional BI solutions. TBR predicts that the BI professional services market expansion will outpace the overall growth of IT services as analytics adoption becomes more mainstream. Vendors that offer end-to-end BI professional services, led by consulting, are best positioned to cross-sell other services that support BI deployments, such as systems integration, ADM, and management services. In the next 45 minutes, we'll cover what's shaping this market and what business models you should be aware of. Before I pass this over to Patrick and Jen, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we're recording today's session and we'll be posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions or thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. Patrick and Jen will address them at the end of the presentation. Or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to either of the analysts or myself at the end of the webinar to set up that conversation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find these slides as well as other thought leadership decks, webinar, and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. And we'll share all these links with you again at the end of the presentation. Now let me introduce Jen Hamill and Patrick Heffernan. Jen practiced law for several years before joining TBR and is the lead on our BI services research, along with covering the cloud and management consulting markets, and is a company focused on HCL Technologies, TCS, Vipro, Cognizant, Genpact, and Xerox. Patrick is a State Department and Deloitte alumni and leads our professional services research team, along with being a resident expert on the management consulting market. Their knowledge of market dynamics across the services landscape is providing the expertise and insight that empowers our clients to make faster, more profitable business investments. And with that, let me hand this over to Patrick.
Excellent. Thanks very much. So what we're looking at here is the program that we're going to cover today. We're trying to look at customer behavior in the BI space. We're trying to look at how customers are buying, why they're buying, and which vendors they're going with. And just as a way of background, typically our approach here at TBR has been to start with the vendors and look at the vendors first. And we build up benchmarks and we take a very business-focused, vendor-centric lens. However, when we looked at business intelligence and analytics, what we wanted to do this time around was start with the customers and get an understanding of what the customers were buying, who they were buying from, why they were buying. This is very much, although analytics has been around for a while and business intelligence has as well, it's still very much a nascent, growing, small, immature market. And so by taking a look first at the customers, we were able to see what the trends are that they were driving rather than what the vendors were saying was actually moving the market. So the way we structured our research is to do the customer study first, and we're doing the vendor research now. We're actually going to issue a business intelligence services vendor benchmark later on this month. But what we're going to present today is the information that we learned in the customer study. So we're going to cover 3 main points here. What did we learn in our research about the opportunity for BI services when we talk to BI services customers? What trends did we see in customer and vendor behavior in this space? And then what is the outlook specifically for CNSI vendors, given the strong position that software-centric vendors already have in business intelligence and analytics? So I want to mention right now, we're going to call out a few specific vendors during this presentation, and it will be clear why we're doing that. This research that we did and what we're presenting today was focused on customers, but it only makes sense. It's impossible to talk about what customers are buying and without getting into who they're buying from. So the big picture is really simple. Customers know they want, and I'll pause for a moment. Yes, the big picture is simple, and that picture that you're looking at isn't simple at all. I love that little Hydra hookah pipe chess piece thing, and I'll explain in a little bit what I think that actually means. But yeah, the big picture is simple. Customers know they want these big data and analytics solutions, but what they need help with is deciding what to buy, deploying it, and then managing it. And those things are what services vendors actually do really well. And we're going to see in a little bit, many of the business intelligence buyers already have a solution in place, but what they need is they need help getting greater value from that solution. So what we're seeing really at this point is where services vendors can step into the market aggressively. They're getting to these clients to provide that additional services layer that customers need. And one thing to emphasize here again, that is coming from the vendor lens, but it does reflect what customers are saying that they want. And services vendors, the way they operate, the way they go to market, they're not going to need to make huge changes in the way that they operate in order to succeed in the business intelligence space. They're just going to have to make some tweaks. So with that said, I do think that what's happening here is the services vendors there, as represented by the chess piece hookah pipe octopus, are actually seeping out into all their clients and providing those kinds of services that are allowing those clients to grow. At least that's the way we look at that graphic, and hopefully that resonates a bit. So why go into this market? Well, 12 to 14% growth, it is far outpacing what we see in the general IT services market. We do a quarterly benchmark on IT services, and the growth in that area, Jen, 1 to 2%? 1.2%. It's really, really small, really slow. So 12 to 14% is significantly faster. And then if you look at the barriers that we see to faster growth specific to BI and analytics, IT budget, that's always going to be under pressure. And those second two bullets, those can be overcome with very smart go-to-market strategies. And honestly, that last bullet, sluggish IT services growth, that may not even apply. It may be that BI and analytics is in its own way really separate from that. And then if you look on the driver's side, the second bullet is the one that jumps out to me. So operational efficiency, scalability, maturation of complementary emerging technologies, that's all great, but it's industry expertise that CNSI vendors in particular probably do better than anyone else, better than the software guys, better than even the more outsourcing focused guys. So with that, I'm going to let Jen take over and dive a little bit deeper into some of this.
Thanks, Patrick. So moving to slide 7, this is a breakdown of the different areas of BI professional services that we cover both in the customer research and in the vendor benchmark. So there will be a slide later in the presentation with the definitions for each of these service lines. So right now I'll just focus on the overall trends that we saw. Just as a way of framing this, in developing the BI research program, we made a conscious effort to draw parallels with our previous cloud research. TBR has been researching cloud for a number of years, and we're seeing a similar trend emerge in BI. Cloud professional services is a more mature market, but we expect that BI services is following a similar adoption path. And it's led by consulting. As you can see, the highest adoption rates are in the strategy area. And this is because customers are still evaluating their options, they're assessing their current IT environments, figuring out how BI can fit into what they currently have. And then once a solution is chosen, customers look to systems integration services to integrate and implement the solution into their existing environment. And this includes converting legacy applications into more modern formats. A lot of customers have heavy investments in enterprise applications that need to be dealt with before any BI or analytics work can take place. And the third category, ADM services, applications development and maintenance. This is around developing customized BI software to suit needs. So those two areas, systems integration and ADM, we're seeing roughly equal adoption rates, but less so than consulting. And the fourth area, as As solutions become more complex and they involve multiple sources of data, both structured and unstructured, customers are more and more looking to operations management services to run their overall IT or their overall BI environment. And this is so they can devote more IT resources to other, business critical tasks, and letting a services vendor run the entire BI environment. So just looking at the graph, current usage rates are varying across service lines, but looking at respondents that have at least expressed an intention to buy, more than 80% of respondents are interested in BI services, which demonstrates that there's plenty of opportunity for services vendors, particularly those that can offer end-to-end services, so covering each of these 4 service lines. So now that we've looked at the overall purchasing trends, let's move on to slide 8 to dive a little deeper into the drivers behind purchasing. This is kind of a complex slide, but overall, speed was the dominating factor of BI services buying. If you look at each of these 4 graphs, these are the top 4 purchase drivers for each service line. And you can see it's pretty small here, but you can see faster is in the top 3 of most of those, if not the top 4. So speed is definitely the major factor, and we see this as customers recognizing that in order to stay competitive in the new data-driven economy, they need to move quickly to deploy BI solutions, or else they'll be left behind. So, like I said, these are snapshots from full graphs that are available in the report, but what I wanted to note here is what we aren't seeing on these graphs is cost reduction. And looking at the results from the study, cost reduction is far down the list, further down than I expected, getting into this research, particularly from what we've seen in cloud. Whereas cloud, cost reduction was the number 2 perceived benefit. Across services, service lines, cost reduction came in second to last as far as a purchase driver. And the reason for this is in BI, customers aren't as concerned with cost, but rather ensuring that the solution can be deployed quickly and seamlessly within the IT environment so they can start achieving business outcomes as quickly as possible. So now that we've looked at what customers hope to gain from BI services, I'll turn it back over to Patrick to look at what customers are actually looking for in a service provider.
And what Jen just said there was perfect. The idea that they're looking for that seamless, rapid transition to deployment. So that means that for BI services customers, when they're looking at the BI solution, which BI solution do we choose? It's a huge decision. It's considerably more substantial than most IT decisions, which, well, obviously transformation is different, but a simple IT purchasing decision is different than deciding which BI solutions, which platform, which applications you're going to bring on board. So that's where the services are able to step in and provide that additional consulting, that informational hand-holding around where should you go with this. And so what we saw when we talked to BI services customers is that for what they're looking for help, they need that contact, they need that personal touch. If you look at the graph here, and I recognize that the print is a little small, and again, like Jen said, this is part of a larger piece that's actually in the report, where you have contact and contact and contact with customer success stories there interrupting the middle of it. It's all about that personal touch, that relationships, and honestly, this didn't surprise us. It points to the need that services vendors have to ensure that their sales teams and their consultants fully appreciate how BI services buyers really are needy. They really want plenty of interaction as they go forward with finding that perfect BI solution. I think this is an area that as we go forward with this research and we continue to do the survey work and speak with BI services customers, I think we're going to see this change. I don't think we're going to have 3 of the top 4 being contact. I think as customers become more accustomed to buying BI services and buying BI solutions, they will need less and less of that personal touch and hand-holding but right now where the market is, that's a critical factor. So turn it back to Jen now.
So as Patrick was saying, contact is certainly an important aspect of BI services purchasing right now, but we have a lengthy quote here from an in-depth interview, but the gist of it is that at the current stage of the BI services market, customers are still unsure about BI. They're still figuring out how it will work within their systems and making sure that they are, the enterprise as a whole is equipped to get the most out of their BI solutions. So they're really relying on BI services providers to provide training and education around BI solutions so that they can learn to use them from not only in the IT side, but the line of business user who's going to be the one in most cases using the solution, to be sure that they understand how it works and they will rely less and less on the services provider to provide ongoing support. So just to refer to the graph here, we saw that the decision-making in BI services purchasing was pretty evenly split between IT and LOB, or line of business decision makers. This is because BI solutions are more frequently tied to a business outcome that requires LOB input, although IT is still needed to ensure that the solution can fit within the existing infrastructure and that it's secure. So that's why we're seeing a pretty even participation between the two groups. And then if you dig deeper into each side, managers and directors are more involved in C-suite in the purchasing process, with the exception of actual purchase decisions. So the most obvious reason for this is that the C-suite most likely controls the budget, and so that's why the purchase decision is more frequently on the C-suite level. But since the end users, like I said before, are most likely going to be lower on the totem pole, the participation is higher in the post-purchase stage for non-executive employees, just reflecting that customers want to be sure they understand how to use the BI solution effectively. So let's switch gears now and look at which vendors are leading the BI services market in the minds of customers. So we can move here to slide 11. Okay. So this graph, this is where Patrick referred to before, where we're going to start talking about individual vendors. So what struck us was that the top three of the top four vendors that we saw as having the highest adoption were actually software vendors. Even though we provided somewhere around 20 vendors as options, and they ran the gamut from CNSI vendors, outsourcing, management consulting. We put it all out there as options for people to choose, but the highest responses came for these four vendors. And the reason we think that this result happened is that customers perceive that software vendors are the go-to for related services. And this is either because they're unfamiliar with the value that a services provider could add beyond what the software vendor is already providing, or, and this is in the case of IBM, discovering that they can get all the services they need from one vendor, including BI strategy. So we'll discuss IBM in a little more detail in a few minutes. So just focusing back on the software vendors, SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft, BI services, in our opinion, is a market that they're in out of necessity, not necessarily revenue growth, and that these vendors would much rather partner with a services vendor to deliver the advisory, the SI, and the management services. So that's an opportunity for services vendors that have alliance relationships with these vendors to become more involved in the BI services engagements. And like Patrick mentioned earlier before, we're in the final stages of launching our first BI services vendor benchmark, publishing at the end of this month. But just as a preview, our data shows that this area is really not profitable for the software-led vendors, which adds even more emphasis to this finding that the software vendors are they're ahead now, but won't be for long. So as Patrick will discuss in the next couple of slides, services vendors have a clear opportunity to target BI customers across the maturity spectrum and stake a claim for future BI services market expansion.
Right, so we'll step back away from the vendors for just a minute because the point on the market maturity and where it is important to understand. I don't think anyone who participated in the study or on the webinar now would think that BI and analytics grew up last night or was born last night. It's been around long enough for Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, and others in the software space to have substantial practices. But what we looked at when we talked to customers and we focused on the services aspect of it, and we looked at, okay, with BI solutions having been in place for a while and services vendors coming to the fore more in the last few years, where on the maturity spectrum are we? And we want to look at the length of time that customers have had BI solutions in place, but then also the sentiment towards increasing their BI use. Not just do you have it, but do you think you're going to need more, essentially. And when you put the two together, as we have on this chart, you can see why we believe the market opportunity for growth for the services vendors is so substantial. More than half of the customers said they started using BI within the last couple of years, so it's brand new to them in many ways, and more than half said they're looking to get more. And if you look on the very top top left of the chart on the right, 19%, almost 20% say that buying new BI is a top priority. So for the services vendors, what becomes key then is understanding that customers are truly looking for testing, planning, development, optimization. Even the 40% here who bought their BI and analytics solutions more than 2 years ago, they're looking for ways to get more out of the business intelligence platforms and solutions and services that they already have. So that ability to do testing and planning and development, and particularly optimization, it fits perfectly into the services vendor strength. So speaking of services vendors, let's talk about two in particular. And this again will be a little bit of a tease into what's going to be in our vendor benchmark. And again, TBR's normal approach is to, and the way we structure all our research, is to start with each individual vendor and build the story from there. So when we look at vendors in the space, two that jump out are Accenture and IBM. And it's important to note we're not looking at these two firms or we're not looking at these two companies only within the BI and analytics services lens. We're looking at these two companies very broadly across their entire lines of business, everything they do, and how that ties back in, and how the strategy that they have at a corporate level then feeds down to the actual initiatives that they take within the different service lines for BI and analytics. So Accenture Strategy and Accenture Digital, they reformed about a year ago now, I think. And these are two of Accenture's four growth platforms. Strategy is the management consulting side. It's all about transformational agenda. It's about making recommendations to clients. It's that strategy piece that's right there in the name. Digital for Accenture Digital is pulling together all the technology offerings. Accenture Interactive, which is around digital marketing, Accenture Mobility, Accenture Analytics. It's pulling that all into one service line, one package. Now, the units clearly work together. You can't have a strategic plan without having some way to implement it. Of course, if the engagement calls for it, not everyone wants that. But this division between the two makes sense for Accenture. It allows them to remain technology agnostic when it comes to recommending solutions all the way down to BI and analytics solutions. It allows them to play in the management consulting space in a way that reflects what they know and do well within the technology space and the BI and analytics, but still provide that kind of service to those kinds of solutions and advice and strategy to their customers. So that's where Accenture sits, and I'll turn it to Jen for IBM.
Thanks, Patrick. So sort of in contrast, but related to what Accenture did to reorganize around strategy and analytics. Rather than create two separate business units, IBM combines their strategy and analytics divisions into the strategy and analytics practice. And this involves analytics and the interactive experience consulting unit, as well as the strategy folks within GBS. And they've organized this practice into separate practice areas based on not just industry expertise, but within individual companies based on the executive roles that they are targeting with analytic solutions. So for example, like I mentioned, interactive experience, this was announced in early January. This is all around digital marketing and using analytics to drive the customer experience. So this practice area clearly targets the CMO, the CSO, the message around those analytic solutions is really targeted toward the outcomes that those executives are pursuing. And they have other groups, finance, risk and fraud, operations and supply chain. They do have a group that focuses on the CIO. And most recently they announced the talent and change management consulting group. And this focuses on using analytics to drive HR agendas, looking for talent, managing the operations of HR. But all of these solutions, they involve business model transformation, but it also is using analytics to drive change within organizations. But by combining the two units together, they can provide an end-to-end solution. So they can give you the strategy, and then they can turn it over to the analytics team to actually implement the solution and manage it for you. So, in my view, this strategy it's going to be tough to beat because they're appealing to the non-IT buyers with the line of business approach, but they're also their legacy and technology enables it to speak directly to IT department concerns, particularly around security and interoperability. So these are twin concerns, as we noticed back on a few slides ago, that we know that both IT and LOB are involved in decision making. So the strategy and analytics practice is really IBM's way of addressing both of those buyers. So we put IBM in sort of a different category. They're a software vendor, but they're also a services vendor. They market their own software products, but they're also supporting SAP and Oracle. They have the scale to sort of be everything to everyone and really meet the client's needs for however they want their BI solution to work. I think move on to the next slide.
Yep. So we're just about 30 minutes in, so it's a great time to say what are we looking forward to? What do we see as the change that's coming within this space, other than what we've already covered so far? What we've learned to do when we're doing these kinds of customer studies, you narrow down a field of people and you get them thinking about business intelligence and services, and you get them thinking about particular vendors, and then you hit them with, well, what's the big picture for you guys? What are you most worried about? What's really going to impact your organization? And it gives you a very useful look into the minds of the buyers and the fears, honestly, that they have. Because if you look at this, data security pops up at the top of the list, and honestly, that cuts across all of the IT services and the entire IT space. It's in the news all the time. Everybody talks about data security. But what we're seeing is that security is increasingly baked into engagements, into solutions. It's becoming more, well, it's not an add-on service. It's something that everybody has to bring to the table. And honestly, everybody believes will be taken care of by their software or their services vendor. So it remains top of mind, in my opinion, because it's in the news and because it is a major risk that has to be addressed. But it's not really going to drive a whole lot of change. The next two factors I think are interesting because they're all about fear of change, fear of being unprepared for change, whether that's technology-driven change or regulatory driven change. And then the fourth factor really is fear of being left behind. And so when we think about services vendors, BI services vendors in the space, they're very good at tapping into that fear and providing reassurances that the services that they will provide will allow their clients to have the foresight, allow for, as we've got on the bottom of the slide, I love the way that's said, agile reactions, so the creative, data-driven, analytics-laden reactions to the market. And that's where we think that all of that feeds into this idea that in the coming near term, it's the services vendors that are going to really, truly take over the space. And like Jen mentioned, the software-centric vendors, they're not in it to grow anyway, and I think they're looking for those kind of partnerships that will make that 12 to 14% maybe seem a little bit too conservative. So that sort of wraps up our view of this entire market based on the customer study that we've done. Jen is going to walk through sort of how we describe the landscape and what the full portfolio is, so you can understand how this study fits in with the rest of the research that we're doing around business intelligence and analytics.
So this slide, these are the full definitions that I was referring to earlier. These are the way that we look at BI services. And I won't read these definitions to you. Everyone will get a copy of this registered. But we are trying to align the way we look at BI professional services with how we look at professional services overall for IT. And these four groups are really the four different areas that services can really be of use for BI. I think, yeah, we can just move on to the next slide here. So as we mentioned before, this is really just one part of a much larger research portfolio that TBR has recently launched around BI. We started with the BI software vendor benchmark. We published it a couple of times, but due to interest in this topic and just the rapid growth of the market, we've really expanded our research of it just so we can fully understand what's going on. So as Patrick mentioned in the beginning, we're covering both vendor analysis and customer buying behavior. And today, the study we focused on services, but we also published a companion study focusing purely on software. So if there are people listening today that are a little more interested in just what the software vendors are doing around BI, we will have another webinar on October 1st focusing specifically on the BI software customer research. And like Patrick mentioned before, the BI services vendor benchmark is publishing in roughly 2 weeks, and that webinar will be on the 8th. So it's a lot more BI talk that you can expect from TBR. And then finally, that last piece at the end, we're in the early planning stages of an addressable market forecast. Don't have a lot of detail on it right now, but it's just looking into how we can refine our analysis of where we see the BI market going over the next 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she just did, yeah.
But what it actually is.
Oh, so an adjustable market forecast is, Allison is reminding us to explain the term of art.
New.
The term of art we're using around here. So an adjustable market forecast, where TBR has built its reputation and well-deservedly so on being able to look at the vendors and examine their past performance and project out, a year or so at the most. Where do we see the trends going, and model out data and model out different performance metrics. The challenge then becomes, okay, I want to know what's going to happen in 5 years. And so an adjustable market forecast is looking at beyond just the vendors that we cover in a particular space. We're going to look at the entire space, so IT services, BI services, what else, public sector, healthcare IT services, cloud, private and public and hybrid and all that. So we're going to look at those, and we're going to project out 5 years and use a methodology that's going to be rooted or going to be shared all the way through TBR, so that we're using a common set of assumptions and a common set of methodology for how we derive growth rates, how we anticipate different changes in the marketplace will have an impact on services, on software, on telecoms, on devices, on the entire range of IT services. So those addressable market forecasts, as you can imagine, are not easy to produce, and they are very much still in the well, they're a little bit beyond infants, but they're not yet walking out the door. But we hope to have the one for BI services sometime in the next first half of next year.
So with that, we're going to start to wrap up, and I appreciate those of you who have sent questions through now. If you have additional questions, send them through, and we'll answer them as you send them across. So the first question we have, everyone, is do you segment the advanced analytics or BI modernization part of the market? If so, what is your view on the transition from traditional BI to advanced analytics?
Well, I can take a stab at this question, but what I want to preface is this is really something that we're looking at more on the software side. We do break down our BI software taxonomy similarly to the BI services where we have those 4 segments. We do break down our BI software analysis between basic tools, advanced tools, BI platforms and applications, and then data warehousing. So we do look at the varying the maturity of the different products for BI. That's something that we address more on the software side.
Okay, so we'll follow up with that person specifically on software. The next question we have is, you mentioned speed as a top driver for purchasing and said cost reduction wasn't as high on the list, which surprised you. What other factors didn't come up high on the list that surprised you?
So we gave a number of options when we asked the question about what the purchase drivers were for each of the BI service lines. Other reasons that were asked but not included in the snapshots of those graphs that we saw were supporting geographic expansion, shift of IT staff resources to more pressing business needs, and more functionality. And I think that these are important long-term factors that are driving investment in BI solutions as a whole, but customers' most pressing concerns that require services are in speeding adoption of BI and maximizing its effectiveness. So although those other reasons, including cost reduction, they are important, but they're not as important as getting BI solutions to market and driving value as soon as possible.
Okay. We have 2 more questions so far. The next question we have is 12 to 14% growth for BI services the whole market, or specific vendors or specific vendor groups?
I'll take that one. 12 to 14% growth is the whole market, but I think the critical part there is there are going to be vendors that do really well, and there are going to be vendors that don't, and that's true across any market. Where I think we'll see the differences, and that plays perfectly into the vendor benchmark that we'll release shortly. We're doing the research now. We're starting to see those trends, and what we can tell already is that there are, well, IBM as a vendor is separate from all the rest, and their growth is going to be substantial, at least in that 12 to 14% range, yes? Close? Okay.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. I think we're going to see the vendors like Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, the ones who provide those kinds of services that take that service-centric and technology-agnostic approach, I think they'll do very well. I think they'll outpace the others. As Jen said earlier, we include the software-centric vendors in our analysis, but they are not growing at the same rate as everybody else. And I guess you could say to some degree they almost drag down the rest of the benchmark. So maybe that 12 to 14% reflects an average that is pulled down by SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft. But I think it's more important to understand is what Jen said, they're not in the space for revenue growth. They're in that space to partner with folks like IBM and Deloitte and PwC and the rest, so that this market continues to grow as rapidly as it has.
We have one final question, so if anyone has any additional questions, please send them through now. The last question we have, guys, is which industries or verticals have the highest adoption rates and why?
So I'll take this one. Certainly telecom was one of the fastest adopters, as well as healthcare. And I think telecom, they're struggling with customer retention and and customer service and understanding why customers are either dissatisfied with services, how they can serve them better, or why they're moving to different competitors, what they can do to try to retain customers. So analytics is really a tool that they have really latched onto to try to get a handle on these trends and make decisions around how to handle the customer experience that can sort of stem some of the loss of customers. And also, their IT infrastructures are so complex. There's so many different sources of data that services they're really required to understand how BI tools can work together and also deal with the legacy IT systems and also pull in data from all different sources. And healthcare is high as well, especially in consulting and application development. And we think this is driven by the need to design and configure applications to comply with data privacy regulations and all these new regulations that are coming up, and to kind of handle the massive amounts of healthcare data that's now available through mobile devices and other touch points, how to harness that data in a way that you can get the information that you need, but you're also complying with privacy laws. So that's where a services vendor can come in and assist with that.
So we don't have any additional questions in queue right now. So with that, I'm going to start to wrap up. So I want to thank the analysts for going through the research today, and thanks to all of you on the phone today for attending. We will be sending out the slides as we talked about at the beginning of the session, as well as a link to the recording. Couple quick things before we follow up. I'd like to suggest everyone follows both Patrick, Jen, and TBR on the Twitter handles listed here. You can also reach out to us on SlideShare, YouTube, and LinkedIn for more information, because we are putting out content on those social media channels all the time. As you're leaving the webinar, there's a quick survey. How good was the presentation, or how valuable was the presentation? Big difference. How good were the presenters? And if there's any other open-ended feedback that you have about this research or the presentation, we do really want to make sure that you guys find value in the time you spend with us, because we realize your time is valuable. So we want to make sure that we're bringing you the information that's going to help you guys make better decisions. So please do give us any feedback that you think we should know about. As Jen and Patrick mentioned, we have several more BI related webinars and thought leadership pieces coming out. So if you haven't seen those, you can check out our WebEx page, where there's a press release out there with all of the upcoming webinars. You can take a look at that and register for those as well. We will send out the presentation within 24 hours of the conclusion. 24 hours by the time we finish up today. And if you'd like to have a follow-up conversation with the analysts, we will be sending out that offer to everyone as well who attended. So with that, I want to thank everyone and hope you have a great day.